What's going on, everyone? This is Graham from 630 Skirmishers, the podcast, the YouTube channel. Do we have much content yet? No, but this is part of that change where Kevin and I are looking to make more stuff. We're passionate about tabletop games, and so this is the way. This is the way that we're going to do it. I am doing a little bit of a video journal series with this video about designing a war game. So Sam Pearson is an ex-Games Workshop designer. He designed Spearhead and Warcry, and he has created or is working on a YouTube series throughout the spring of 2026 here, where he's designing a war game and kind of doing these video essays on how he's designing them. And he kind of invites us as viewers to join along. And I said, sure. And maybe it's just my weird content wired brain, but I thought the best way for me to follow along was actually to also make a video series about it. And there's some tie-ins to Star Wars Legion. And so I said, you know what, why not? I'll do occasional live streams or recordings about my experience doing this, following along, and trying to kind of stay on top of things. And maybe this can be a little bit of accountability for me as well. So without further ado, I want to talk to you about the concept of this game that I'm calling Realmwars. I don't know if that's a bad title or not. It seems kind of fine, maybe. But this video series is going to serve as my notebook for designing this war game. I'm following the process laid out in Sam Pearson's video series, and I will probably be making multiple short videos to record my thoughts and progress and experience, not like a one-to-one doing whatever he says in one video for one of my videos. So part of this process, I mean, yeah, it can be content. It's more for me than it is for you. No offense. But this is an opportunity for me to flex my game design muscles and grow and just share my thoughts. I want to have a lot of fun with this. I'm going to experiment with writing my very first war game with this process. And I want to write bold rules and see if I can create the experience that I'm envisioning in my head. If I can create the feeling in the game that I can't quite put my finger on, but I can almost like envision. I can envision a feeling, and I want to try to make that. It will be very cool at the end of this process if by the time his video series is done, I'm also nearing a sort of serviceable version of a base set of rules. And then maybe even create like a PDF or, you know, some sort of document to let other people play without me being there. I think that would be cool. So that's what this video series is all about. So now let me talk about the game that I'm envisioning. My starting concept is to write rules for the existing Age of Sigmar miniature range. Obviously, if you're watching this, you're familiar with Games Workshop and their fantasy line called Age of Sigmar. I love the models for this game. I actually think the setting is incredibly cool for this game. And over time, they've slowly but steadily built up the lore for their game and made a really, really cool setting. I play a little bit of Age of Sigmar. Most of the time I'm playing the Spearhead format, and it is a really fun way to just get some models on the table. But whenever I am list building for, you know, Age of Sigmar proper, or actually getting in games, I find myself tripping over the game itself. A lot of it is my inexperience so far with the game, and really this isn't a criticism of it. It's just that I'm inspired by the models, but the game itself is a little bit unintuitive to me as someone who's played a ton of American miniatures games. So it's sort of that final, or the Fantasy Flight line of game design. You know, I've played Dust Tactics was a game that they made. I played Imperial Assault. Obviously, I played a ton of Star Wars Legion. I've played Star Wars Shatterpoint, which does share some DNA with those games. And overall, that those games just kind of make sense to me at this point. And if it's my first war game I'm ever designing, I would like to really lean on the stuff that I know very well. But sort of the hook that I have for this concept in my brain is rather than using standard Fantasy Flight custom dice or Atomic Mass Games custom dice, I want to use polyhedral dice that you would associate with Dungeons and Dragons. I know that there's got to be a Venn diagram of like people who think Age of Sigmar is cool and people who think Dungeons and Dragons is also cool, and you see the Age of Sigmar models and you're like, oh man, I would love to use those in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like there's kind of this weird overlap, I guess, is the best word I can think of. And I think that would be very interesting if you said to someone, there's a version of Age of Sigmar that uses D&D dice. Or maybe that's not the right way to pitch it, but you understand what I'm saying. So I think the polyhedral dice will actually translate pretty well to some of the existing Star Wars Legion mechanics. And because I'm so familiar with those, I don't feel like I'm reinventing the wheel in terms of doing the math. Like I think there's a lot of math and mechanics and sound game design that I can sort of port over. And I'm sure it won't be seamless, but I think it's a great starting point for me to do this thought experiment, for me to do this project. So the last point here, I will circle back to a little bit more, but I often find that Legion, particularly the first edition of Star Wars Legion, was very incremental. It leaned into its own tight math a whole lot. A lot of units would get like average 2 hits, or you can add a heavy, and it's going to average 3.5 hits. And if you add an aim, it's going to increase the average number of hits by roughly 1, depending on the unit and the dice that you're using. And so, like, if you really juiced up a unit, you could get to, there's 3.5 hits with 2 aims to get up to 5.5 hits with diminishing returns. And so, like, the range of damage that you could do for a long time was like 2 to 5, which is like, and they're 5-man units. But you're rolling saves and you have dodges and stuff, and so on average you're doing like 2.5 hits. So you're really like nickel and diamond. You're chipping away at stuff. Having sound math is good. If that's the whole game, that's not always super exciting, especially if you've got objective design that's also pretty safe or pretty incremental. The nice thing about that is that randomness is not at the forefront, and it's not going to define the games. It's going to lean more into player choice and the decisions you made during those games and the tactics and the smarts and the brains that you have. So that's very good. I would like to try injecting in more impactful splashy plays that either you have to build around or build up to, but try to create multiple moments in a game round that feel exciting. And in order for that to work, I think the backdrop of the game has to be a little bit muted, and that's where the tight math, I think, really comes into play. It sort of forms your canvas of your experience, where average units do average things, and maybe you can be really clever with those units, but then there's also going to be a couple of times where you're really landing these big haymaker moves, or you're able to stack a couple of strong movement effects and really switch up the game state. And I would like that to happen more than just once a game. So ideally, once or twice a round is kind of what I'm envisioning. But like I said, we're going to touch on this more later. Some additional thoughts and goals. This is a list of things that's just kind of off the old dome. It's not super airtight. I'm just going to start going down and describing what I mean by these things. So, one thing that I bounce off of with certain games design, I'm thinking a lot of the latest Atomic Mass Games designs like Shatterpoint, as well as a lot of Games Workshop designs, thinking specifically like Kill Team. They use legalese, they use rule-ese to write like the abilities. And That's really great for adjudicating how things interact because the language is very tight and you can say, well, is this a move or is this an advance? Oh, it says it's an advance. So it triggers? Yes. That's really nice and clean, but that's really hard to like read an ability. And it says when a unit activates, if it is within 6 inches of this other ability, it may choose to use this ability. When it does, you're going to replace the dice. You know, like you almost trip over yourself. And so you have to read the whole ability, process it, and then you say, oh, I get it. I would like the player-facing rules, maybe your cheat sheets, your unit cards, that kind of stuff, to use plain verbiage. And it says, uses a better die for rallying. Great. I get that conceptually without having to think too hard. And I would like to ultimately write my rules kind of like that. This is a high magic setting, and so I want to make magic feel unique from other abilities. And existing Age of Sigmar does this very well. If I'm basing it off of Star Wars Legion, there's not like a magic element to that game. There's no psychers, there's no... I mean, I guess force powers is the closest thing you get to that, and they feel slightly different, but they also have overlap with like heavy weapons and missile ordinances and super tactical droid protocols. And I would like magic to feel different here. The magic in the setting is so prevalent. I think I could probably like use a resource like mana or something like that, and it would be just totally reasonable to just draw on mana, even for like non-magical units. But specifically, like your spellcasters are going to care a lot about your mana resource. I think there's a couple different ways that I could make magic feel pretty unique. I want to feature a neat activation system. I think being able to choose any unit you want is really clean when it's your turn. I do want to probably do some kind of alternating activations. Whatever the activation system is, I do want it to reduce the downtime between players. You know, the infamous like 40k move phase. I don't want that. Where it's like, oh, you're going to move for 20 minutes? Cool, I'm going to go get a drink. Like, why are we doing that? We don't need to do that. So I want a neat activation system that includes, that includes some kind of alternating activation thing. And I think there's a lot of cool systems that are out there. Star Wars Shatterpoint is random based on specific unit. I think that works really well if you don't have really big armies. You know, you only have 6 units aside in Shatterpoint, and so you have a deck of like 6 or 7 cards. Great. Love it. I think Legion with the order tokens is really interesting. I really, really like that. Bolt Action infamously has sort of this like pool where you throw a bunch of dice into a bag. You know, if you have 10 units, then you put in 10 of your dice. Your opponent's got 12 units. They put in 12 of their dice, and you just start pulling out dice to just randomly decide like, hey, it's your turn. And so you can go like 5 times in a row, potentially. I mean, it's all random, but... and their whole game is designed around that and somehow doesn't fall apart or break. And so like that's really inspiring that the whole system doesn't break down even though you don't have that control. So I got some ideas on how to do that. I want to include psychology as another angle of interaction, as in not just unit removal through damage. There's a lot of war games where the main way that you can throw off your opponent's plans is just by removing their stuff, by dealing it damage. And I always thought psychology was a really interesting element, going all the way back to like old Warhammer Fantasy. And then even in other more modern games, you know, Dust 1947 had this like under fire suppression system that then got transformed into the Star Wars Legion suppression system. Star Wars Legion also includes fear effects that tap into the same thing. And I was thinking of doing something very similar, but the goal here is to shut down your opponent's plans, even if you're not totally defeating their units. I think it'll create a lot more possibilities of interplay that I'm really excited about. Star Wars Legion also has amazing army building rules in terms of like, it's just fun. It's fun to build lists, and you just imagine like, well, I'm going to outfit this unit with these upgrades, and that's going to change the role that this unit plays in my army, and that will allow me to do this kind of cool strategy. And we're going to see if it works. So I really would like to implement that as well if I can. I'm sure it's much easier said than done, but I do think a key part of Legion is that it lets you take a unit and then it lets you customize that unit through the use of upgrades that also have point costs, and so you can balance with different upgrades against each other. And I think that's really good. So I'm probably going to start with something similar and see how it works. But I think customizing units is a really good way to make your army building very interesting. So my next point is to avoid Games Workshop design pitfalls. And this is to taste. This is my opinion, and it's avoiding the aforementioned friction that I've felt with Games Workshop games. It's not so much a pitfall, right? It's like the customer is always right in matters of taste, right? To my taste, I like some things and I don't like other things. And the things that I don't like as much, I'm referring to here as pitfalls. You can like whatever you like, right? There's pros and cons to all kinds of game design things. I mentioned the extended downtime that I would like to avoid. Excessive randomness, those massive pools of dice that you're rolling, where it's like, okay, I'm attacking with orcs and I'm rolling 80 dice, hitting on 5s, re-rolling 1s. And you just do that for a while. And then you're like, now I'm going to roll to wound. Okay. And now you're going to roll to save. Okay. And then you have a feel no pain and you're going to save again. Okay. And at the end of it, it's like, I got 7 hits. It's like, man, did we have to do all that just to get to 7 hits? Like, there's got to be a better way. In those environments where you're rolling so many dice, if your dice go cold, you're just SOL. I understand it's a dice game, but I think you lean into that tighter math I referenced on the previous slide here, and I think that'll get you further. That tight math and efficiency. I think you can still achieve the same results without having to go through so many rolls and re-rolls and more rolls, and I think that's just a time suck. And it's not very interesting, right? Have you ever watched like a Warhammer battle report and they're like, all right, so I'm going to move over here and I'm going to attack. And then it's like a minute to resolve that attack on the battle report. And then you're like, okay, and you lose 4 models. Your turn. And then they spend 6 seconds deciding what they're doing, 10 seconds moving the models, and a full minute to resolve the attack. I would like to avoid that. Another point on excessive randomness. So I know it happens a lot in Age of Sigmar, where it's like your commander has an ability and they're going to issue a command. Does it work? Roll a die. Half the time, it does nothing. Cool. Now my spellcaster is going to cast a spell. I'm going to roll 2 dice. It does nothing. Cool. I think the roll to do something is like a very weird way to write games. I don't want to see if I do it. I want to do something. And maybe it's going to have varying levels of success, but like just I paid the points to bring this unit and then it just sits there. Like, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So yeah, I'm interested in avoiding that kind of stuff. There's also, I call it invisible or hard to track effects. This is mostly in my mind referring to like auras. So like my lieutenant has a 12-inch range to give you +1 to wound, and then my captain has a 6-inch range to give you reroll 1s to hit. And so A, it's just a lot of dice manipulation sometimes, and B, the auras are like these ongoing passive things that you're constantly managing, versus a system like Star Wars Legion where when you give buffs, it's just, here it is, here's the buff, it's represented by a token, it's a resource, you spend it, you're done. It makes it easier to track. We'll come back to it. I'm a little bit sheepish about the components because effectively I'm designing a print and play game, right? I'm not like making a box to sell to you that has everything you need in it, so I have to keep that in mind. Last Games Workshop design pitfall is winning at the list building step, where the game itself can... It's almost like the game doesn't matter as much if you can bring a superior army with superior synergies in a better army list. That happens in 40K sometimes. Sometimes that's related to codex creep. Sometimes it's related to you're designing an army to synergize a certain way, and so if you stack all the synergies, then your army is just that much stronger. I think it happened in previous editions more. I feel like 10th edition 40K reduced that a bit. So that's good, but yeah, I just... That would be one metric of success I want to pay attention to later on down the design process, to make sure that the mechanics I'm designing are universally beneficial enough that it's not just, you brought the Khorne Demon that buffs other Khorne Demons, and you put him with an army rule that buffs all the Khorne Demons, and so you're playing Khorne Demons. Like, I don't know. There's something about that reduces the expression that I think is really cool in war games where you can customize your army. Also in card games where you can customize your deck and you can lean into cool combos and strategies and stuff. I want to make sure that I'm... A sign of success would be to foster that kind of experience where you can express yourself through the army that you're bringing. That would be great. Much easier said than done, but that's a goal that I have. So last couple things here. Ensure army construction avoids spamming units. This is typically done through detachment rules. You can only bring so many of these units, or if you bring enough of your core troopers, then you're going to unlock the ability to bring war machines and stuff like that. Different games do it different ways. 40K also just has the rule of 3, and you can't bring more than 3. But somehow Age of Sigmar 10 years in does not have this, so you can bring lists that are I brought 6 of the same unit and a character, and that's it. And it's well, I don't know, where's all your troops? This doesn't feel like an army, it just feels like you guiding 5 monsters down the battlefield. It's a weird sort of lion tamer trope, something happening there. And I just think that breaks immersion. So for me, again, personal taste, I would really like the armies to give off a regimented army vibe. So, and I alluded to this a second ago, but I want to utilize easy to obtain components. So that's just, it's like I said, I'm designing sort of a print and play game, and I want to keep that in mind. On the one hand, using tons of tokens like Legion and Shatterpoint and a lot of other modern games do, it does help clear up what's happening, and it kind of helps you check the board state more easily. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Also gets a little bit fiddly, and I think Legion pushes that a little bit. Shatterpoint less so. Shatterpoint's pretty much in a sweet spot of tokens on the table. So yeah, I also would love to make it in such a way where you don't have to 3D print a bunch of tokens if you don't want to. So I'm thinking about things like a deck of playing cards. Is there some way that we could do orders through that, or coins, or poker chips that you can use to just the green poker chips are for offense and the blue poker chips are for defense, and that's it. That could be pretty tight. So we'll see. Just something that I'm going to have to keep in mind here. So this is my high concept. In the next video, when I have a chance to record, I'm just going to talk about my first response to Sam's first video in his video series, where he is diving into his high concept for his game, and he's got sort of an elevator pitch, and then starting to break down what your core tenets are. So that's going to be what my next video is. But for now, I think this is going to do it for today. I'm glad I was able to set this up and record. And if you watched this, then hey, thanks a lot. It means a lot to me, just because I'm doing this for myself and also to share with others. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll tune in next time.